Hi, it's been another busy few weeks. I've added a new machine to follow up the work done last time and added edges to the map. Before that though, the game is now available for wishlisting on Steam. The link to that is in the description. I started the week by drawing the sprite stages for dead pine trees. Once I'd imported them into the Unity project, I set all the trees to be dead to just see how it all looked. This was the result. The shadows need a bit of adjustment, but they're generally about right. I decided to put off the actual code implementation of this though, as I just thought there are more urgent features that need adding, but it's good to know that part of the work is done if I do return to them. From there, I moved on to actually getting to work on the assembler machine, which takes parts from the CNC and creates items from a recipe set by the player. The most simple items to build would be chairs and stools, so I created a simple sprite for that. I then split it up into 3 separate parts: legs, seat and back, which can be put together in different species combinations to create unique items. You'll see what I mean by that later. Once I'd exported and added the new items to the game, I discovered that the recipes were displaying the item sprites in the wrong place, so I adjusted them to be centered. I then updated the CNC machine from last week's video to make sure it outputs items of the same species that went in. So maple lumber becomes maple chair legs, obviously. With all of the preparation done, it was then time to create the assembler in Unity. It's a machine with 3 inputs and 1 output, like the combiner, so I'm using the combiner placeholder sprite while there's no art for the assembler. As I've made quite a lot of machines now, it was quick to get that added to the build menu. And obviously I had to create a control panel for the machine. I just copied the CNC one from last week because the machines work in quite a similar way. The way the assembler works is whatever item enters the assembler, the item which comes out must be the correct mix of species. So if the machine receives maple chair legs and a pine seat, the assembler will combine those parts to create a mixed maple and pine stool. This was going to be tricky to code, but it's necessary for the machine to be believable. So the way that works in Unity is an item is made up of a few different sprites which are overlaid on top of each other to create the item. Here I'm creating the chair prefab. I then updated and exported the chair sprites to make them look a little bit nicer and copied the chair prefab to make the stool. That was as simple as removing the chair back. By this point I was getting a bit of a headache, so I went for a walk to chill out a bit. Right, so once I was back, I got the machine working to some extent. It appeared the machine wasn't doing anything. I just hadn't put the chair and stool prefabs on the correct layer in Unity, so they couldn't be seen. I then just did a little bit more work on the code to get everything working perfectly. And like that, the machine worked at last. Here you can see it combining whatever parts enter it into the stool which the player has chosen. I'm not gonna lie, I'm super happy with how this turned out. It's really satisfying watching the different variations coming out of the machine. So aside from this, I'm also moving back to university this week. Alongside development, I've spent quite a bit of time packing up all my stuff. I had a year out last year, so it's exciting to be going back to finally finish my degree. Right, so back to the game. I thought it was about time to sort out the edges of the map. The forest has always looked like it's just a flat plane in an endless void, so I thought it would be good to add a third dimension to it to make it look like solid ground. I based the code for this on the original fence I made a few months back, and that didn't quite work out. I had a realization that I could just use the entire thing as the grass sprite, as the dirt would be covered everywhere but the edges. That worked wonderfully, and this is how it's looking. It works regardless of how the land is laid out and looks pretty clean. I like it. As this game is a sort of tribute to those classic management games of the late 90s and early 2000s, I think this suits the vibe quite well. There are other approaches, but I didn't want it to be too attention-seeking. The final thing to do was draw and animate the assembler machine. It took a little while to decide on a design, but ultimately chose to base it on the CNC. I did this to demonstrate that the two machines have similar functions, but the assembler is more expensive to build, so has more machinery on the roof. Once I'd added it to the game, this is what it looked like. There are some issues with objects overlapping the machine in some places, but I've got some ideas to fix that. The channel has had ridiculous growth the last few weeks, and I'm releasing this video to an audience of over 1,000 subscribers. That was a real stretch goal for me, so I'm so happy to have reached it so quickly. As I'm going back to university, I'm not quite sure what the workload will be like, but I'm hoping to keep releasing videos as much as possible. I'll be aiming for every 2 weeks, just to make sure I keep on top of the quality for these videos and my uni work. That's all for this week. If you liked the video, please do subscribe, wishlist the game, and I shall see you next time. Cheers for watching.